Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Crusader Kings 2. This is the Greyjoy tutorial. We were back with Lord Paramount Dalton, the Red Kraken, in Lease. Last time we left off, we explored... What did we do? We explored some of the title stuff up here. We explored Cass's Belly, so pretty much reasons that you can go to war for. We explored raiding as well, because raiding is kind of a mini version of warfare. And for certain factions, it's really important to know how to raid. So here we are raiding this. I think we were going to talk about this... Alright, so here's what we'll do. We'll talk about this one, and then we'll talk about this stuff over here. And then we'll move on from there if we have time. But we're not going to look at Lease, because Lease is stupid. We're not going to look at Lease. Instead, we're going to look at the... I guess you could call it the character panel, but for the territory. I'm not sure what this is technically called. But whenever you click a territory, a county, a barony, a duchy, what have you, they're all going to have this thing here on the left-hand side. So let's look at Pike, for example. So we can see that we've got a bunch of stuff here that looks kind of like the titles, and it is kind of what they are. You can see Kingdom of the Joeblivion Isles. You can see the High Lordship of Pike, Lordship of Pike, Kingdom of the Iron Isles, well, Joeblivion Isles this time, and they all kind of do the same thing. They all, if you click on any one of them, they go back to the kind of realm. It's called the realm. Interesting. So it can't really say too much about all of this. We can say this is current capital. Current capital. That's not a capital, and that's not a capital either. Does Dalton own more than just... No, he only owns Pike. Right. So because Dalton is technically of the king tier, if Dalton owned, let's say, Pike and Lordsport, he would actually have the option to be able to choose which capital he would like. What does that say? This county is your capital where you and your court resides. When you send your spy master to study technology, discoveries will be made here. Capitals are worth more war score. Ooh, I didn't know that. So this normally is a little button where you can pick if you want to choose some place as a capital. I think, depending on your religion and your culture, you can only move a capital once per lifetime or per 600 days or something crazy. If we click the name here, we can actually rename it, which I think we saw a little bit of that in the last episode, but you can also name territories. For example, I can call this... God, what are we going to call this? Just going to call it that. We're just going to call it that. And we can see it actually changes, well, it does change it on the map. It changes it on the map and changes it on this little screen here, so you can change the name of your territories. I think you have to own the territories first. I think you have to own them, but we will see. Let's name this one Adrak. Okay, so I can name territories because I am a higher tier. So pretty much because I'm king, I can demand we name stuff however we like. However, if you're a minor lord... You, for example, can't change the name of the kingdom if you're a minor lord because you don't have the right to do that. You have to earn it first before you can do that. Cool. And then we see we've got various pictures here. Now, these pictures, the little graphics here, they actually change based off your culture. So we can see that the Westerlanders, they've got different stuff than the Iron Islands do. And I think that's pretty much the same across the board for all these other ones. If you go over to the east, they kind of look different. And generally, the further east we go, we see different shit. So we've got tribes and nomad villages and still more kingdoms. And then you've got, like, eastern stuff. And if we go way over here, more eastern stuff. But we can even see over here in Yin, the Golden Empire of Yiti, they've got far eastern stuff. So that's kind of cool. Changes based off of what your culture is. And essentially, you've got three types of, what would you call this? A holding? Yes, build a new holding. You've got castles, you've got cities, and you've got religious buildings, which are either shrines or sea halls or sites based off, again, off of the culture. Essentially, it works like this. Castles are the hardest to take, and they provide the most troops, but they have bad taxation. Cities have good taxation, provide some troops, but are a lot easier to take. And the religious sites essentially are really easy to take, don't provide much gold, don't provide many troops, but they provide you with, I think, piety over time. And if you click on any one of these holdings, you can actually build stuff. You can build stuff, and you don't actually have to own it either to build stuff, which is kind of cool. So so a great example would be, let's say you start off here in the Westerlands, at, let's say, the time of the conquest, Aegon's conquest, at that time, the Rock and the Westeros doesn't really have many ships. So they can't attack the Iron Isles, for example. But what you could do is, if you had enough gold, you could start a mass building project along all of these coastal areas to just start building harbors and stuff. And then, you know, you give that a couple years, all of a sudden, you've got a pretty damn decent-sized fleet. So you can do kind of crazy stuff like that. Or if there's like a great plague or something breaking out in some part of the world and you want to be prepared for it, you can build refuges everywhere, and it'll protect your people, kinda, sorta. It's better than having nothing. So if you go over here, we can see we own Pike, and we can build all sorts of stuff here. Well, I mean, let's look at some of this stuff. We can see tax value. Ooh, look at that tax value. And I love how it goes into detail. It goes into such great detail. Unfortunately, I don't really make use of a lot of this because it's just too much detail. But it is cool. It is cool to see, you know. Base value minus 10%, stewardship skill plus 56, collect taxes, total income 17, current base tax. See, that's cool. The fort level you generally are going to be looking at. If you're going on the conquest, you're going to want to know what the fort levels are, especially here in a Game of Thrones, because once you hit fort level 10, it can no longer be assaulted. They have to siege it. So for Dalton here, it would actually be useful to build basic defenses, because then Pike would go up to level 10, and now it can't be assaulted. So that's good. Ooh, total levies. What is this? Garrison size. Ah, yes, the garrison size. You can also see this down here in this little bar here. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see the garrison and the levies, and they're represented by this little green bar here. So right now, the garrison here is at full capacity, 5,200 men. You cannot raise the garrisons. The garrisons are permanent fixtures. They do not move. On the other hand, the levies are troops who can actually leave the castle, and we can see we have 6,337. There is 139 here. That's because we're training troops right now in the capital. It even breaks down what they are: light infantry, heavy infantry, light cavalry, galleries, max reinforcement, you know, per month. That's cool. Effect of the settlements modifiers, all that crazy stuff. And when you're being sieged, it takes into account both of these numbers. So sometimes, particularly for your capital, it's nice to have your levies stay home, because it makes it even harder for the enemy. You know, if you know the enemy's going to be rushing your capital, it's really nice to have your levies here too, because it makes it that much harder to capture. So, I mean, if we kept our levies at home, we would have almost 11,000 soldiers here, which would make for a pretty damn long siege. Combine that with basic defenses, and the enemy would have to have at least a 10,000 stack army here, if not more, and they'd be waiting for a long time to take the capital, which is great, because as we've discovered this episode, that contributes more towards a war score. We will get into what a war score is when we actually declare a formal war, but for right now, we'll just keep going. We will keep going. What else do we got here? So this bar right here, I don't think there's a... Oh, no, this bar is useful. It is useful because on this side, on the left side of this bar, it shows penalties and bonuses that this territory is getting. I wonder if... Here we go. Levy reinforcements, levy reinforcement rate plus 50%. So they've got a little bonus here. They're recruiting more than normal. And you get all sorts of stuff here. See? High taxes, local revolt risk. That is a penalty. Levy reinforcement. So positive, negative. Red is bad, green is good. On the other hand, you see... does it only show straight crossings? I wonder. Let's see. Yeah, it seems to only show straight crossings. Straight crossings, I mean. So if there's a straight crossing, or if there's going to be some... Well, no, it's not going to show amphibious assaults. It essentially shows if this territory is bordered by rivers or straits. And if you've ever watched any of my other series, you know how important that sort of shit is. Like, when you've got a war where you and the enemy have equal amounts of forces, and it can go either way, it's really, really important to win those first initial battles. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you're not taking unnecessary risks. Like, you're not doing an amphibious landing when you don't need to, and you're not crossing a river when you don't need to, or you're not doing a straight crossing, which is designated by these little red lines here. Right, so if there's an army here on Sawcliff, and I need to attack them, that's a strong position, because from both directions that I have access to, it's going to be a straight crossing, which puts us at a disadvantage. Does it say straits can be crossed by armies without the use of fleets? When attacking over a strait, the attacking army will get a significant combat penalty. Yes, so you want to avoid that, and generally you can check right here to see if that particular area has this little modifier. Let's see, De Jure Kingdom. Oh, it shows the De Jure Kingdom. That's cool. The De Jure High Lordship. That's nice. Culture, religion, supply limit, revolt risk. Culture is pretty straightforward. It's whatever culture, well, is think of it like the people that live there. So if your culture matches the culture of the people living there, everything will be great. If your culture is different from their culture, normally that's okay, that's acceptable, but it's when you have a different culture and you try to convert the people's culture, then you're going to get problems, and it's going to transform to revolt risk. And revolt risk is just a percentage. I don't know how often it ticks, but it is a percentage for the likelihood of just random armies spawning in your territory that are going to be hostile to you, whether they're peasant revolts or religious revolts. This number determines what's the likelihood of that happening. Right now, we don't have to worry about that. We have competent counselors. We're prospering. We just held a lavish wedding. So all that stuff is contributing to give us a revolt risk of 0%. So we don't have to worry about that. Oops, didn't mean to click off that. And the religion is kind of the same thing as the culture. You know, you want to have, what would you call it? You want to have complementary religions and cultures, right? It's when there's differences that you might start to encounter problems. Now, the supply limit is really, really important, and generally what that means is it's the territory or province's ability to kind of sustain standing armies. So for example, 31.5k, that's pretty damn high. So Pike here can actually support some really large armies. I mean, we're talking maybe 10, definitely 10,000 soldiers, maybe 15, maybe 20,000, but that's beginning to, that's kind of a stretch. There's not many provinces that can support 15,000 plus soldiers. When the supply limit doesn't support the amount of soldiers, they begin to face attrition. Essentially, they're starving because there's not enough food and supplies and things like that. And Westeros is generally pretty good when it comes to supply limits. It's when you get into tribal areas is when that really becomes an issue. And in Westeros, that's going to be stuff that's north of the wall. So if we look at the Gorge here, see, look at this, supply limit of only 1.2k. That's terribly low. Terribly low. If you sent an army of 10,000 here, they would face attrition that would be pretty damn bad. We're talking maybe even 100%, which means you don't lose all of your army, but you lose maybe half. So imagine you march 10,000 men here and 5,000 starve. Like that's terrible. You want to avoid that, and the way you do that is by keeping in mind what the supply limit is. Oh, see, like these places wouldn't be able to hold 10,000 men. They probably could hold like 5,000, maybe. It all depends on what the supply limit is, and it goes into detail, breaking it down. You know, base plus forest, total supply is 10k, coastal province plus 50%. So you can look at that sort of stuff, and that's useful. And then over here, and we talked a little bit about this when it comes to the rating. It's just county tax and loot, you know. Tax modifier 100%, loot protected by the fort 19, max loot 29, possible loot not protected by the fort is 10 gold. Raise local liege levies, raise local levy fleets. Okay, so these are the same things that as if you went to the military and you raised them this way. It's just the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of extra stuff, and some of it is redundant, so you don't have to worry about all of it. Because once you get into the how do you say it, once you develop your habits for accessing certain things, you don't really have to worry about this. Like, I never use these buttons. I always go to military for that. Down here, let's start with prospering. Prospering is probably way more important, although these are both pretty important. Prospering is kind of, it's generally how well the territory is doing. So you've got prospering, you've got, actually, I have forgotten the other, when this goes up, it turns into shit like flourishing and booming. And we can look at the bonuses. We have revolt risk goes down, tax modifier goes up, disease resistance goes down. And, you know, you've got a lot of people moving in and out of the province. They're doing business and stuff. So disease would spread a lot easier. And levy reinforcement rate goes up by 5%. The longer your county goes without being sieged or raided, the more likely this is going to go up. You can also affect this with your steward. You get a competent steward and put them on Oversea Realm. You get the option, there's a possibility for the demean to improve, and that means this will go up. And generally, you want this to go up. The higher it is, the more money you're going to make, the better everything's going to be, except for disease resistance. This thing, on the other hand, is your refuge status. And currently we have no refuge. Let's put this away. We have no refuge in this county, which means we have a disease resistance of minus 10%, which is not good. It means we're very prone to epidemics and things like that. If we did want to build a refuge, we would have to open up the extended province view. This is also really, really important. Let's start from the top. Up here, it shows you the terrain of the territory. This is so vitally important when you're in a war, because different types of terrain affect how battles can go. So because Pike is hills, if we were attacked here, and let's say we were the defending army, we would get all these bonuses. Pikemen, attack and defense goes up. Archers, attack and defense goes up. Horch archers, same thing. We would get a lot of bonuses. There are some territories where you get no bonuses, like plains. That's definitely one. There's also forests. Where are forests? We're probably going to find some forests up here. Let's go to the Wolf. Yep, there we go. Wolf's Woods. What? Where's... Okay. I guess Game of Thrones, you don't get a bonus for fighting in the forest. I know for Elder Kings you do, so I guess it changes from mod to mod. We got some more hills. We've got plains. Plains, you don't get anything. Let's find some mountains. There we go. Now these are... Yeah, so what this does is it makes mountains really, really useful for war. If you can get into a position where you're defending on a mountain, you get lots of bonuses. Look at this. This is a lot of bonuses. I like it. I don't think there's anything... No, there is other stuff. Westeros is kind of bland in that there's only like 3 different types. If we go down to Dorne here, we can actually see desert. Look at that, desert. Now, it doesn't say... Let's see. It doesn't say that it does anything, but it definitely should, because the supply limit down in Dorne is really, really bad. And generally, you're going to suffer a lot of attrition when you march huge armies through Dorne. Although it doesn't say it will. It doesn't say it does, which is kind of interesting. But if we go down here to the Summer Isles, we can see it's jungle. Look at this. Light infantry, heavy infantry have it easier. Pikemen have it easier. Archers have better defense. Horch archers take a huge penalty to fighting in the jungle. So that's cool. What else you got here? Is there anything else? Anything else useful around here? Maybe? No? No, it all looks alike. Just more deserts and stuff. Maybe if we look into the Dothraki area. Nope, they're just plains. Just plains. Okay. So terrain, really, really important when you're fighting in wars. For example, you don't want to be attacking an army if they're defending on a mountainside. Generally not a good idea. Down below that is refuge, and it does exactly what you think it would. We can build a refuge for 100 gold. We're not going to do that right now because Lord Paramount Dalton doesn't have much in the way of money, although we are making a lot of money by raiding Lease. Once this is built, it then comes with a bunch of upgrades that you can then pay for as well, which will make it better. And ideally, if you have enough money, if you have a fortune, really, you can maximize your refuge, and once you do that, you don't really have to worry about diseases anymore unless, like, the Great Plague breaks out, and in that case, there's no escaping that, other than, like, getting in a boat and just floating around in the ocean for 20 years. Now, below that is a fort, and as far as I can tell, the only use of a fort is if you want to stop or mitigate attrition from attacking a place that has a very low supply limit. So, for example, let's say we're trying to capture the Gorge, and we know that the supply limit is super fucking low. We can get our army here, and we can establish a fort. Kind of like think of it like a frontier settlement or something. And it would mitigate, in theory, the terrible attrition. Now, a fort is not going to keep 10,000 men safe. It just won't. But it might allow maybe 5,000 to be in the territory like that, and they won't suffer from attrition. It's one of the few ways you can attack tribes or frontier territories. Besides that, I don't think they're really all that useful. If you guys know of any kind of tricks or anything for the forts, please share it in the comments section. Down below that is the trade post. Can't do anything with this if you're a feudal kingdom in Westeros. We just can't do anything with trade posts. If you have the, what is it? You have to have a certain DLC, right? You have to have the DLC that allows you to play as Merchant Republics, and you could, for example, play as Lease, because they're a Merchant Republic. It says right here under the government type, and you can build trade posts, and they are very lucrative. You know, you want to get as many trade posts as possible in some of the best places possible, of course, and you will make tons of money. But we can't really do a whole lot with that right now. So let's hop on back to Pike. Going over to Lease seems to confuse me for some reason. We'll go ahead and we'll just toggle that back there. We covered all of this. These are the same thing as this. Let's see, Lordship, Castle. Ooh, it's called a Lordship. Where's the city? Ah, City of Lordsport. There we go. Little city graphic right there. Breaks down what types of troops it offers and everything like that. You can see the fort level is actually pretty damn low. Now, the last thing we can cover, or maybe the second to last thing we can cover, is in the upper left corner of each one of these little portraits, it shows a kind of sigil. And these sigils pretty much show who owns these little, little holdings, right? So the Castle of Cod is owned by... Well, I mean, it's not necessarily owned by... This is the sigil of Cod Castle. Like, that's what it is. Whoever moves in, they get this little sigil. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that these holdings have their own little sigils, but it is what it is. And even shows what their garrisons are and stuff too. That's cool. The last thing we can talk about on this little thing is build a new holding. We can establish new stuff. Assuming we have 800 gold and 730 days, we can build a new temple, city, castle. So certain areas you can expand. Certain areas you can't really expand, though. Like, it depends on how much land is... Well, Castle Rock's a bad example. For example, it'd be like Dragonstone. Since it's so small, it doesn't have infinite space to build on. So eventually, some territories cannot, fill up every slot possible. Lease, for example, is great because it can fill up every spot, because it is a goddamn huge island. So... that's nice to know. Ooh, it shows a little fort level there, too. Very nice. And we can switch between the siege view and the regular holding view with this little button here. Great. Now, let's finish up the episode by talking about this stuff here. This is your mini-map. This is the mini-map down here. And all these are different filters you can use for looking at stuff. So right now we're looking at the terrain filter. I like the terrain filter when I'm not worrying about war because it makes things look more natural. But oftentimes when I'm in war, I'm constantly using the realms feature. And this breaks down what is mine, what is an enemy neighbor, different little factions that is, this shows that it's, this is Case, Sarsfield, Ashmark. They are temporarily independent from the Rock. Why is he called the Rock? He's not a king. Is he rebelling? Oh, that's why he's rebelling. Okay, very nice. See, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have the realms filter on. Over here, we've got diplomatic relations. I never use this one. Because, frankly, what the hell? I can't tell what the hell any of this means. Religions is also really important if you're doing if you're playing in a way where you want to expand your religion. This is really, really useful. I use this a lot in my Warhammer series because conquering people who have a different religion from you is going to make them, disloyal, I guess you could say. And so converting them becomes a priority, and this is a great way of determining what religions are where. What is this? Cultures. This is not so important because generally this isn't going to change. Not unless people are actively proselytizing. But, for example, for the Ironborn's culture to spread, we would have to conquer, let's say, the Westerlands and then start proselytizing and hoping that our priests can, convert the people to the way of the drowned god. Economy, this is only useful for raiding factions. So this would be useful for Paramount Dalton. Just shows, what would be the best places to raid. Pentos, Mir, Tyrosh, Storm's End, Lannisport. Oh, yeah, I bet. Let's see, we got de jure. Now, de jure, these de jure filters are useful, but not always. They're useful, I find, if you're trying to determine who to give titles to. Let's see, it breaks down high lordships, it breaks down regions, and it breaks down de jure kingdoms. See? Very nice. Revolt risk is also useful if you're suffering from revolt. So we can actually see the darker a territory is, the more likely it is going to revolt. So you can see we got some spots here in the Riverlands. We got some spots here in the west. We've got a really, really bad spot here in Pottingville, which actually, it shows peasant unrest plus 10% and revolt risk is 10%. Okay, that's useful. Dynasties, not that useful, in all honesty. Not really. It can be interesting, though, but I generally don't use this. Opinions, again, not really useful. It does kind of show you who likes you and who doesn't, in a weird sense. Direct vassals. I have never used this before, and I honestly have no idea what it does. Yeah, I don't know. I've never used it. Trade zones. What are trade zones? Tyrosh. Right, so if you're a Merchant Republic, then this is definitely some filter that you'd be using, because it shows you the trade zones, which is kind of cool. I kind of like that. Governments. Yeah, not useful. It's not useful, because the government types barely change. They barely change, and you figure it out without needing this. Defensive pacts. Apparently there are no defensive pacts. This filter is really, really useful, not in Game of Thrones, but it is useful in Elder Kings. Because when you start expanding really, really rapidly, you start generating a threat level because everyone gets intimidated by your growing power, and then they form defensive pacts to kind of combat your expansion and to kind of balance the games. But in Game of Thrones, this isn't really a thing. Epidemics. You only use this when you've got an outbreak of something. Let's see, the world is currently ravaged by one plague. The Red Death started in Gorosh. That's down here, isn't it? Ah, here it is. The Red Death. Red Death has struck this province, a terrible disease typically caught in the hot and humid lands of Sothorios. 9 victims of every 10 die screaming, bleeding copiously from every orifice, their skin shredding away like wet parchment. Gross. Fucking gross. But generally, if you want to see diseases going on, this is how you would use it. Right, let's go back to terrain. We just covered the minimap. Now, there is some stuff here I don't know about. Like, what is this? Custom map mode slot. Drag map modes here for easy access. So I could put terrain here. I could put realms here. Oh, this is... is that really useful? Oh, it has shortcuts, too. Wait a minute. These have shortcuts, too. Yeah, what is the point of that? Is that really useful? I'm not sure. What else is here? Well, you can drag stuff here. That's kind of neat. These are really the only ones I use often enough to justify it. Toggle the map modes interface. Oh, okay. So we can shrink it if we need to. Kind of cool. I've never had to do that before. Lock, unlock, minimap openness. Whoa. What just happened? My minimap disappeared. Oh, it goes away. Interesting. Let's lock that there. What is this? Next song. Holy shit, you can choose your music? Oh, right, this is in-game. Okay, I'm using my own custom music right now, so I can't hear it, but I didn't know you can change the song. That's cool. Message log, nothing going on there. These things down here, some of these can be really important. So we've got the main menu, which is just, you hit escape. It's the same thing. Ledgers are useful for looking at more details. If you want real details, this is where you would go. I think I've only looked at one of these once or twice. All in all, not really useful for me, but it could be useful for you guys. Go to home province. Okay, that's one way to do it. Find title or region. Ah, okay, so we can just find stuff. Never really use that, though. This one I use a lot, and if you've watched me play my series, you would know I love this feature. Find characters. One of my favorite things to do... Jesus, do we have enough time to cover all of this? I don't think so. No, I'm all out of time. We'll have to cover find characters in the next one. This is super, super useful, and we will go into detail for it. What is this? Zoom in, zoom out. Oh, so essentially, it's just, in case you want to make zooming in and out harder, you can just click this and, not use your mouse wheel. Or in case you're playing with a mouse that doesn't have a mouse wheel, which I feel bad for you if that's the case. And then, what else is there? No, I'm not going to jump into anything else. I will get carried away if I do. This will have to be the end of the episode. I hope it was informative. If you found this video entertaining and or useful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always. This has been Crusader Kings 2, the Greyjoy tutorial. I have been the Golden Joeblivion, and until next time, I will see you all later.